Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 294 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is David Howe.
My name is Patrick Nisley.
My name is Summer Rain.
Oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest joining us for a very interesting topic on today's episode of the podcast. We have from Digipen, the one and only Stephen O. Bent, ladies and gentlemen.
Everybody. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's great to have you, Stephen. Like I said, we have you on because we're going to be talking all about gaming universities, getting a higher education in the field of video game development, and more specifically, Digipen, where you are currently an instructor. I'm actually really excited to talk to you more about that. I've heard about Digipen for a long time, but never gotten a deep dive. So this will be a fun talk. We also have a lot of gaming news and rumors to go over before we get into the main topic, including Sony had a state of play. The DICE Awards happened. There were 3 big winners there. We'll discuss that. There's also a new Switch patent that means you might be able to flip the old thing upside down. So we'll see about that when we get to that point in the news. But until then, how's everybody doing? We have a good week this past week.
I didn't have a very eventful week, but it was fine. I think it was a pretty low-key weekend for me. I'm trying to think of any highlight I can talk about. And I guess I don't really have a lot because pretty standard stuff.
In times like this, Patrick, it's best to just make something up.
Yeah. A long lost uncle appeared and gave me money. That's what I want to have.
Holy God. That's amazing.
This week, you're manifesting it right now.
There's still time. It can happen before Wednesday.
That's great.
But things are good. No news is good news in that regard and all that. And I've been playing some games and stuff, but I'm going to save talking about that for the end.
Very cool. What about you, Summer?
Yeah, my week, it's kind of been a little stressful. I've talked about it a little bit in Discord, but one of our dogs is like really sick. Murray, he is, we keep going back and forth with him on like whether he wants to keep it. We're having those hard conversations, and it feels like it's like every other day. It's like it's a constant monitoring situation. So he still gets up and runs to me when I get home, and he still wants peanut butter specifically. So we're going to see how long that lasts. I got a heart-shaped pizza on Valentine's Day. I never did that before. I thought that was a fun thing to do because I saw that our local pizza place was doing heart-shaped pizzas, and I said, I want that one. And my sister came and hung out for the weekend. So that means I played a bunch of games that I don't normally play and ate more pizza. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. I've had an eventful weekend, you could say. On Thursday, I went and got some scans, and everything's looking all clear on the scans front. So did an MRI, got a CAT scan, nothing to report. I got an official follow-up tomorrow, so maybe she'll be like, psych! But I think for now, the message seemed good, so I'm happy about that. Let's see, what else? I had a little bit of an emotional breakdown on Saturday, but I played some fun video games at the end of the night. I went over to my friend Carrie's house, you might know as Real Tomato, and we played some Party House and just had a really nice time that evening. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. What about you?
I had a cool week. I just started in rehearsals. I'm playing trombone in a musical theater pit for Hades Town at a local high school, cool. Which is like one of my bucket list musicals to be playing. But it's also, Summer, you thinking about your dog made me think of this, but I first learned Hades Town like a year ago while my dog was going through her last days, and she was like my heart dog. And I like that. I don't know if you know Hades Town, but it's the Orpheus story about like death can't stop me. I'm going to wait for me. I'm coming for you. And I like went through a lot of big feelings like with that musical and with my dog Kaylee as she was passing it. So being back in this space of like playing that music and living in that storytelling is like, I cried during a tech rehearsal, which is, and not for the usual reason of like the lights aren't working, where are the monitors, but like, like all these teenagers on stage acting their heart out, telling the story about, love, the power of love overcoming death really like got to me and hit me in a tight place. And so now I get to go do that every single night this week, which will be not at all emotionally exhausting.
It's crazy how like sense memory can bring that kind of stuff out of us, It's
Totally. Just like that. Like
senses.
I'll even just like hearing a couple chords in that show and my brain is like back to those moments. Thinking of you and your dog and hope things go the best way they can.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, last week we did an episode on tabletop games and the sort of interplay between video games and board games. And over on our Discord, we had a really great conversation about lots of elements from that. Wanted to shout out a few folks. Hans, of course, who's a big tabletop gamer, so they love tabletop games. And they also said that they really appreciated this episode and they were hopeful that it would mention Root Digital. And we did. We talked about Root. So we got that one in. Talking about Real Tomato, they said they are stoked to start playing Wingspan after hearing Summer describe it.
Let's go, birds. Let's go, birds.
Mm-hmm. When I was at Real Tomato's house, a bird jumped onto my back and then pooped on me immediately.
Oh.
So.
Wow. So you get like the real bird experience.
Absolutely.
When you play with Real Tomato. Yeah, I've seen the videos of that bird.
And then we had a lot of talk about the mouse functionality that allegedly will happen with the Switch 2. And so I just wanted to shout out that conversation. It involved a lot of people, including Carosetta, Swampy Southpaw, Cool Uncle Vince, Cena, the Huge 27, and AV, who said Mario Paint 2, which I think is
inevitable.
Pretty funny.
We will be making Mario Paint covers again.
That'd be really nice. I do have an extra shout out, if that's okay. I did want to give a shout out. It's kind of a sad one. I wanted to shout out because we don't really have it in the news, but recently Victor Antonov, who was one of the art directors at Valve and Arcane on like the Half-Life series and the Dishonored series, sadly has passed away at the age of 52. There's not like a ton of press, I feel like, around when someone really notable in the games industry died. So I just wanted to make sure to give them a shout out. And what an incredible talent. I mean, if you've played any of those games, the art direction of those games is almost what stands out to you immediately when you turn them on. So a brilliant mind and very sad to hear that. And hopefully we'll see lots more stuff from people that were inspired by Victor going forward in this world.
Well, we love to hear from our listeners and viewers. And if you want to be shouted out as well, then definitely leave a comment on the YouTube or share the podcast somewhere online. Or if you want to help us out, you can also financially support the podcast by becoming a patron over on Patreon. And like I said, we have a YouTube channel. So if you're just listening to the podcast and you want to see the video version where we've got trailers and our faces and other things, then hop on over to YouTube. And while you're there, other things. That sounds bad. But
catch us on our OnlyFans. We show
all the things. Anyway, while you're on the YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe because that also really helps us out. And we're going to talk about the gaming news for the week. So first up, we've got the Sony State of Play. There was a rather, I thought, robust State of Play showcase that happened this past week. Had a lot of games. I think it's, again, proof to me why I'm doing a Nintendo podcast and not a Sony podcast. Like, I think all these games look cool. They're just not for me. I mean, to varying degrees, some of them actually do look like I would be interested in them. But give me your opinion. But this felt like a pretty good presentation. Maybe it's because there isn't a lot happening in Nintendo or even Xbox or whatever, but this felt pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was pretty beefy. I actually did watch this. I had it on while I was at work. And I thought as far as State of Plays go, they can be pretty crummy a lot of times. I feel like Nintendo Directs kind of bat a lot higher average than State of Plays do as far as quality is concerned. But this one felt pretty good. I mean, the Sonic Racing got like a full reveal, which looks really cool. I mean, I'm a big fan of I think it was Sega and Sonic All-Star Racing Transformed, I believe is the full title. I was a big fan of that game, and I'm really looking forward to trying out this one, which we do know is also coming to the Switch. There was some other cool stuff, but yeah, like you said, Patrick, it's like like for instance, there was a trailer for a game called Dreams of Another that's by the people that make the Pixel Junk games, right? And I'm a big fan of the Pixel Junk games. And I was like, man, this looks really cool. The art style looked really interesting. It had like a dreamlike ability. But then the camera goes back and it's just like a guy in a third person shooter, like shooting at like an assault rifle. And it's like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess you just have to throw in assault rifles into most of these games in order to get in the state of play. But, it seemed like an opportunity, especially after a game like Astrobot won the Game of the Year, that, it feels like maybe Sony would start to maybe pivot away from a little bit of the Call of Duty crowd that they've been really trying to court with a lot of these state of plays recently. But we still see a lot of those coming in, and it is definitely like a twist on it. It's like you create with the gun instead of destroy and whatever. I don't know, whatever. That's fine.
I love tricking Call of Duty players into doing something else with a gun.
Yeah, exactly.
We couldn't get them to play Splatoon. What could we do?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. I mean, that's the way to do a shooting game and have it not feel like you're training a school shooter.
It was the only shooter that ever got my attention, Splatoon, and like it got shooter of the year when the year it came out. So I'm just saying, like, they did crack the code. No one else needs to try.
I think so. Anybody else have any standouts from the state of play they want to talk about?
I just want to mention the Shinobi game. I don't know. I think this game had already been announced. I'm not entirely sure if that's true. I think it is. But just watching that trailer, I'm really excited about it. And that's another Sega game. It's not really a Sony game. So probably will also be on the Switch. I'm all in on that game, I think, at least from what I'm seeing. So I hope that the other Sega revivals also nail it as well as this one looks to be, at least. But
yeah, but you're right. Anything that we're interested in is probably coming to the Switch. Like Sega games are going to come to the Switch.
Yeah. Maybe we'll see Sony games do as well.
I do think it is interesting to talk maybe a little bit more about the Sonic racing game, right? In the world where presumably there's going to be a new Mario Kart around the same-ish time.
Probably. Yeah.
Because this does look like a pretty good Sonic racing game, and it is cross worlds. And David, you have pitched, and I think a lot of people are thinking that the next Mario Kart might be more of a crossover game as well.
I mean, Sonic and All-Star Racing was like that, where it was like Sonic and other Sega people,
Yeah. So it'd be kind of funny and also kind of sad for Sega if those two ideas both happen at the same time. But
I honestly am not so worried about that. I mean, Mario Kart's going to blow Sonic Racing out of the water regardless, right? So it's like they know that, right? They're just trying to suckle at the dangling teat that's available to them right now. But I think that
listen, I still frequently see my cousin's kids log on and play like the Garfield racing game and the Nicktoons racing games. Like, just because we're not playing them doesn't mean that like children somewhere aren't playing like every racing game available.
No. And what I was going to say was just that like they do their own thing. What I like about the Sonic games is that, the boosts stack, and that everything kind of like the movement, the little intricacies of the movement like set themselves apart. So it's like A, people just care because it's Mascot Racer, and then B, the hardcores that like kart racing games and enjoy the actual mechanics, they have like the tiny little details to chew on, right? So I think that's going to be enough for people that are already fans of the franchise.
Yeah.
Well, if there's nothing else about that, we'll move on to talking about the DICE Awards. The DICE Awards happened this past week. It's another big video game awards show. And once again, Astrobot took home Game of the Year. Kind of seemed like there were, like David hinted at the beginning, 3 big winners at this show. There were obviously multiple games that won sort of more niche categories, but Helldivers 2, Astrobot, and the new Indiana Jones game, it's Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, seemed to win a lot of awards.
Yeah, Balatro won 3 as well.
And Balatro, you're right. That was another big one too. Which makes sense. Those games did pretty well at the other game awards as well. And except for Indiana Jones, which wasn't eligible. So
right. We'll see when the Game Awards comes around next year if they forget about Indiana Jones because it came out right at the beginning of the year. That happens at the Oscars and stuff like that all the time.
I feel like the Game Awards has been pretty good about it because like notably I think about like Super Smash Brothers had come out Ultimate,
That's right.
right?
Yeah,
for the
after
Switch.
the eligibility period. Yeah.
Right. But people like kind of forgot until nominations had come out for the next year, and we were like, oh yeah, that's what's gonna win. That's right. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like that'll happen with Indie at the Game Awards, because it is just everyone that I know that's played it, and myself included, is just blown away.
Yeah, I enjoyed the Game Awards. That's not what it's called. I enjoyed the DICE Awards this year. It was pretty cool seeing game devs kind of in their element. It's not overrun with celebrities trying to pretend like they care about gaming. You know, it was very much like a bunch of really socially awkward people presenting and accepting awards, right? Which is like, you love to see it. It's great. It was authentic. People were actually dressed up. I think it was like, what was it? I think maybe it was the indie team, but one of the teams went up. It was just, of course, it was all white dudes, but they're all dressed to the fucking nines, and they like looked really dapper. And it's like, hey, at least they're trying, you know? Like they're like, don't we look good?
No, it was like, really red carpet level stuff. I felt the same way watching it. I also I have to say this because it was something that I kind of like when it happened. The Wukong devs were not there, and they did take home like one award. I don't remember what it was for, but
it was art direction.
Okay, when that happened, I was just like, oh, because like you know what happened after the Game Awards. They were not publicly good about losing.
Yeah. So at least we don't have another controversy on our hands. But yeah, I think ultimately this kind of shows me that like I enjoyed this as an alternative to the Game Awards, but it still does funnel a lot of the same big games that win and everything.
Sure.
Winning the majority of the awards. And that's kind of just what happens with award shows in general. So I think, you know, it makes me excited to have something like this that is a little bit more like industry focused. But I think it's also important for us to have stuff like the Independent Spirit or the Independent Games Fest, IGF Awards, you know, kind of like the movie industry has the Independent Spirit Awards, you know, so that a lot of these games that really, you know, didn't get as many plays as the big games, and therefore not as many people in the academy actively voting for them, get their time in the sun as well. You know, there just kind of leaves out a lot of the AAAs or like the big names that are going to be in everywhere else. Although I'm sure Balatro would take home a ton of awards at an award show like that as well. But it was overall a really fun thing to watch.
Moving along to talking about Xbox. So Phil Spencer, as he does, went on another podcast and was talking about how they want to be transparent. And in the future, you know, when they have showcases like their Developer Direct showcase that they recently had, from now on, you're going to see a lot of other platforms, you know, at the end of the trailers showing what games are going to what places. So we can expect to see, you know, PlayStation, Steam, and Switch icons in the future. Basically just another statement proving that Microsoft and Xbox are kind of going multi-platform. Apparently he kind of, I don't know if you want to say backpedaled and said that, you know, some versions are going to be different and that kind of thing, and maybe some games won't launch at the same time and yada yada, but it's just more confirmation that the exclusivity era of Xbox is probably gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think recently, like since we did that episode on Microsoft going third party, he has said that they are still working on hardware, you know, and even about a new console box, right? So, you know, the messaging is still kind of at odds with each other, I think, coming from Xbox right now. I feel like they're probably, I don't know that, you know, maybe they've got one more like pro console in them, and if it just sells like absolutely nothing, they're just going to throw in the towel, you know. But it does seem like they're leaving avenues open at the very least for, you know, a third party play here overall. But it is going to be a little weird to see the Switch 2 logo all over, because I'm sure most of these games that are going to be coming to Xbox in the next year or so will also be getting Switch 2 ports.
You really think so?
Oh, yeah. I know at the very least, there's been a lot of rumors about the new Doom game. I think a lot of this stuff will be coming. You know, they're putting it all on PC, so I don't see why they also wouldn't put it on another handheld.
I guess it's just more for me wondering if that really is what the specs of the Switch 2 are going to be.
Yeah. I mean, they've already got a mandate to where a lot of these games are going to have to be playable on an Xbox Series S, right? And I'm not saying that those are going to be similar architectures, but they are, they're already building these games with scalability in mind, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
We can move on to talking about Switch 2s being sold on the black market. So I think we all kind of suspected that this was happening based on peripheral makers talking about it, but apparently somebody who is leaking essentially that they had the Switch 2 early has shown some DMs where they are communicating with what sounds like, manufacturers of console accessories to sell for quite a bit of money, like around $40,000, a early copy of a Switch 2. So the leaks continue, and now people are stealing them from the production line and selling them, is what it sounds like.
Well, we actually have some breaking news. A buyer actually has officially happened.
Kidding.
And I've got it right here.
Oh,
It's a Switch one. It's a Switch one. It's a Switch one.
You got me.
That'd be funny. What if I spent $40,000 fucking dollars on?
I was just going to say, Steven, tell me that you bought it, but it was with like your research.
Oh no,
funding
I'm holding out till it gets down to $35,000. That's
okay.
Yeah, okay, good for you. That's that's good. That's
the Digipen
right
money.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, obviously that's pretty ridiculous, but also kind of understandable if it makes sense for these companies to do it. But we can move on. We got some patent news, which is always fun, but this one's not so great. First up is that apparently there are some patents that have been filed in the US that sort of track with the patents in Japan that Nintendo is using to sue the Pal World developer. And the sort of speculation is that they're going to take this lawsuit maybe internationally or also bring a separate lawsuit in the United States based on these patents. It's kind of a confusing legal situation where you might say, how could they do that if they just filed these patents? But apparently they're like addendums to patents that already existed. So theoretically that works. We don't have to get into all of that. All you have to know is that this is a little bit premature to state, but people are speculating that it sounds like Nintendo might continue their lawsuit and expand it, which is, as we've discussed in the past, this is just kind of, I don't like patented game mechanics. I don't like Nintendo being that aggressive about especially patents for game design stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of these have been objected to or flat out rejected by the patent office, right? So I think American versus Japanese patent law is different. And I think that a lot of more of the like game designy stuff here in the States is not as rigid as far as patentable. I don't even know what you would say. I guess game design elements as they are overseas. So it's, if they really do want to continue this and really continue trying to fight, because it definitely seemed, I think the first time they were only awarded like $60,000 or something from Pocket Pair. So it was like, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like for Nintendo, that's like a drop in the bucket, right?
Well,
so,
and your legal fees are going to run way more than that winning
precisely,
that lawsuit, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it seems like they definitely want to continue this and that they were picking their battles so that they could take this to the next level internationally outside of Japan. But I think they're going to have a tough road ahead of them because I don't think the U.S. Patent Office is just going to bend over like that, right? And just kind of like let Nintendo do what Nintendo wants to do. So it'll be interesting to see. This kind of comes after a couple recent losses by Nintendo
I was
in
just
courts.
about to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's you don't see that very often. So this might be a little bit of a sea change.
Yeah. I wonder if, because that's where my brain went, was if this following losses, does that mean that there might be a certain attitude towards Nintendo of, oh, great, here we go, another one, that they might be faced with a little more scrutiny over like, hey, you can't actually get away with this.
Yeah, Nintendo needs to stop letting their new legal interns handle these court cases. But anyway.
Well, our next item is also about patents, and I don't actually know for sure if this came out of the same patent that we were kind of talking about last week, where there was a lot of interesting stuff, or a new one. Suffice to say, there is a patent out there that people have parsed through and found that shows the Switch 2 with the Joy-Cons connected in reverse or upside down. However you want to explain it. And presumably
Spider-Man style.
Yeah. You can make out with your Switch 2.
Finally.
In the rain.
Presumably the idea here is that you could play it either way, right? Like the screen will rotate, kind of like how phones rotate, for landscape and portrait is how I'm seeing it, right? And I think that makes good sense depending on if you accidentally do it or if you just want to have the ports in a different position or something. Why not if it makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit deeper than that, than just like, if you could do it, why the hell not? I think it's like, although it is a very
What's
Nintendo
deeper
thing
than
to
it being
do.
upside down, David?
Well, I mean, okay, we've got two USB. We've got a USB-C on the top and a USB-C on the bottom, and I think a lot of the speculation is that both of those are going to be used for attachments, aka attach, which is a name that we've been hearing for a while. So I could just see there being instances in which having a central USB-C instead of one off to the side or one that utilizes the different locations of the USB-Cs works better when the system is upside down. An attachable screen, say a USB-C camera that would go like right in the center of the console, any number of different sort of things that you would want to use for attachments. And it just opens the door for developers to make third-party peripherals dependent on how you want to do it. And I mean, if the console has an accelerometer like the original Switch also does, that can detect whether it's upside down or right side up, that also kind of opens the table for Tate mode handheld, and attachments they might have for that as far as, playing your Switch vertically. So I just think that there's, the imagination kind of runs wild with possibilities here.
I'm laughing because my immediate thought was, great, now we know for sure that whatever the next Pokemon generation is, there's going to be a Pokemon that in order to evolve it, you have to take your Joy-Cons off and flip them. Because Inkay, in order to evolve an Inkay, like after it levels up after a certain level, you have to flip your 3DS upside down. And like keep it that way. And then it registers that it's upside down and then it evolves. So I'm like, that was my first thought. I was like, oh my God, what Pokemon is going to require like the switcheroo?
I'm just looking forward to like Nintendo Switch 2 like trick shot videos where you pull the Joy-Cons off and flip it in the air and then catch them upside down.
We're going to see that.
It's a juggling based game.
No, we're going to see that at the Olympics now. Right? Like now that we know that esports is going to be a new category of esports because they're like, Switch there's a physical element. So like, it's got to be at the Olympics.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll take that bet, Summer. I'll say that.
All right.
All right. Well, next up is this news came out of the financial reporting that Nintendo did last week. We talked about that, but this little bit of news has been making the rounds this week, and that is that the Nintendo president, Furukawa, made a statement in the report or somewhere in the meeting about tariffs. So we all know here in the United States that the government is putting tariffs on different countries for various different, items and stuff. And like a lot of electronics.
But in a nice, predictable, clearly articulated way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, according to Nintendo, go on.
But Furukawa's statement was essentially that they are prepared for things like this. I don't know that he said, that anything is, that it doesn't matter, but essentially kind of saying that they have been preparing for this and inciting that they have, manufacturing, as I think we've discussed on the show before, in other areas, in particular Vietnam and Cambodia. And so I think the way I take it is that, they'll be smart about where they ship which units to.
Yeah. I mean, right now it seems like a lot of the big tariffs are, other than the ones that are strangely going to our closest allies and neighbors, Mexico and Canada, feels like a lot of them, there's like a 10% one that's been levied against China. And so historically, a lot has been coming out of China. And I think this just might see, like you said, a lot of either moving shipments to their Vietnam headquarters and then shipping out of Vietnam to bypass these tariffs, just relying on the Vietnam and Cambodian factories in order to produce more equipment. But I think on top of that, I don't think this is just about the tariffs. I think this is also about exchange rates. The yen is still as weak as it's ever been right now, which is not a bad thing for Nintendo, to be honest, because that means it's going to be cheaper on their end, manufacturing wise, and then they'll be making more with a strong dollar overseas than they would be at home. So I think that they're excited to get things out in the international market outside of Japan right now. But I just think all of these factors are sort of swirling around at the same time. And it sounds like Nintendo kind of has an in-house kind of keeper of the world economies that's kind of trying to figure out the best practices. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Switch 2 come out at a lower price point than I think a lot of people are actually predicting right now. Furukawa has even said as much, that they are going to be, trying to keep things as competitively priced as they've always been historically, right?
Yeah,
so I wouldn't expect a $500 Switch 2 or anything like that, even with the whole tariff situation.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear your opinion on that, David, because Nintendo has, in my mind, something that I always see them as being the accessible option, right? People who are like thinking about like dipping their toes into video games and don't have like any, video game history, they get into Nintendo because it is the more affordable option. So the idea of a $400, $500 system is like, that puts that away. So that makes me feel a little better hearing that.
Yeah,
$350 I can handle.
Yeah, and I mean, I still am a $399 Andy on this. I think we're going to be seeing a $399 price on the Switch 2. But like, $350 is not out of the question. I'm not an economist. I'm just a fucking idiot. Okay, talking on a podcast on the internet. I certainly don't know anything about this sort of stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised to see it coming competitively priced. They've all of their consoles they've ever shipped up to this point, they have not sold at a loss like all of their competitors have. So if this is the first one, and still, I think that this console is going to be made for relatively cheap. I mean, they're not putting OLED screens in it, according to all the rumors. So that shows that they're trying to even cut corners where they can to keep the price down. So I would expect it to be competitively priced.
I was just talking to my students last week about early 4th generation handheld console war and how the Game Boy came out for significantly cheaper with way worse features, than the Atari and Sega competitors of the Lynx and the Game Gear. And the Game Boy just blew them all out of the water because it was so much cheaper to start with, and also just the battery life was ridiculously better because of its terrible graphics and audio.
Yeah.
And people were like, yeah, I can play more game. I don't care how many colors you have.
Exactly. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Make it look worse, last longer, good game.
Put it in more hands, fun game.
Yeah.
As the old adage goes.
But like two sides of the coin, because now that I have an OLED screen, I feel like I can't go back, and you reminding me of that also makes me mad. I noticed a scratch on my OLED screen the other day, and the first thought I had when I noticed it was, but the Switch 2 is not going to be releasing with an OLED screen.
Well, hey, good news. I actually have a Switch 2 for sale right now for $41,000. Trying to make a profit on this.
That's fair.
Yeah. So hit me up.
All right. Well, our last bit of news here is the Nintendo Alarmo device is now generally available to the public. As you may recall, it was
for $43,000.
Just given. Alarmo was previously only available to Nintendo Switch Online subscribers, and you had to have an NSO account. But now anyone can get it through the Nintendo website. What do y'all think? Do you think this was... Oh, you've got one. There it is.
Yeah.
That's what you were doing.
Oh, you went to your bedroom to get it.
I went to my bedroom to get my Alarmo that I've never actually turned on.
You've never even used it?
Well, I'd say you got my bed stand's a little too low, and I gotta put it up. I keep forgetting to set my Alarmo up, but I did want to show that I do indeed have one. I got one.
Yeah, I'm actually really eager to hear about it. So you need to start using it.
Okay.
Before we close out, because this is kind of a non-news item, but I am curious to hear y'all's take on why they did this. Why do you think they set this as an NSO only thing? Because I don't know that that's like people are going to be like, oh, I'm going to have to subscribe.
Is there a big demand for this? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing that's confusing about it is that you need NSO to use the features, don't you? Or are they making like an NSO less like mode to it?
I don't think so. I think it was just a
internet.
No, you don't. I don't think you need an NSO subscription to use the device.
I
right?
thought it was linked to your NSO subscription. To
it was in order to purchase it, right? But that's not going to be the case anymore. In fact, Nintendo is putting alarmos in a lot of hotels in Japan right now.
Stop.
Actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stop.
That's another news item that we don't really have on here, but we'll lump it in here. So it's like once you like you could buy an alarmo on the black market and like and be a PlayStation Plus guy and still use it, But it's like, I think, to answer your question, Patrick, I think that this is a test run for pre-orders for Switch 2.
Yes.
Right. And I think you guys talked about that last week, I think, on the show. And I completely agree with that. I mean, I think that that's also kind of a reason that I think that, bringing it back to Switch 2 pricing, I think that that is a way that Nintendo will be able to sell the Switch 2 at a lower price point, is because they're going to be wanting to hold pre-orders for that first batch back for people that have NSO accounts, with the main reason being seeing how many people sign up for NSO subscriptions just to be able to get a pre-order. You know what I mean? So if you take into account the $20 a year or whatever it costs to have an NSO account, then you're like, oh, what's $20 in the face of $350 or whatever. I'll totally get that so I can make sure to have one day one, right? So I think that they were kind of testing out something like that with hardware, with Alarmo. That's my theory on it anyway, but I really see them doing that going forward.
I just want to note that the frequently asked questions on the Alarmo purchase page includes the question, what bed sizes are compatible with Alarmo? Which is not a question I have asked with any frequency of any alarm clock, but I can reassure you it is compatible with twin to king size beds. So
oh yeah.
Pretty much covers it.
That's great.
Yeah, that's all of them, right?
Will it work in my conversation?
California King incompatible, unfortunately, apparently.
Yeah, that's just a little too big. Yeah.
It is incompatible for couples.
That was
sadly.
what I was going to bring up again. I have 2 dogs that sleep in the bed with me. That's like literally been the reason why I haven't gotten this, because y'all know I love a Nintendo gimmick. I just can't justify knowing that it's going to pick up every dog fart, and it's just like, that's not me, man.
The frequently asked questions cover that as well too. It does say, can Alarmo be used if you have multiple sleepers and or pets in bed? And they just recommend using button mode in that. See, that takes the fun out of what it's all the features. I should get I should get a discounted version. At that point, it's just a very expensive alarm clock.
Yes.
Yeah.
As much as I want to be woken up to Pauline singing Jump Up Superstar, I can still do that with my phone.
Yeah, exactly. You can put the sound of Pikmin dying as a ringtone, so who cares?
Yeah, who cares?
All right.
That's one of the alarms, is Pikmin dying.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Precisely.
All right. Well, that does it for our news segment for this week. We are going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking with Steven about teaching at and just generally about Digipen. All right. We are back. And this week we are talking with Steven O'Bent about teaching at and the sort of general experience of being at a game development university, Digipen. So, Steven, thank you so much for coming on and joining us this week.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, maybe you could just kind of introduce yourself and talk about your background first, and then we could talk a little bit more about Digipen, but I'd love to know just kind of...
Yeah, for sure. You can know how I ended up there, which is a little bit of an unusual path compared to most of the folks at Digipen, and then we can talk about the college as a whole. I came in kind of more as a classical musician background. I have a Bachelor of Arts in trombone performance, which is a highly employable degree, let me tell you.
You landed on your feet.
Some of my closest friends had that same degree. I'm familiar.
Just turning down, 7-figure gigs left and right with that one. I love trombone. Grateful for that. I got a great liberal arts undergrad degree that set me up for like good critical thinking skills, not a lot of employment. And then I toured for a long time with a juggling group called the Flying Karamazov Brothers. That's like a 4-person vaudeville music comedy juggling, a lot of Switch 2 work. No, so I did that for about 8 years. That was my full-time job. And then I got a little tired of touring and being on the road all the time, and started to think, what would be a more stable career path? I'll get a master's degree in music. And so I did that. I went in for the University of Washington for choral conducting with a music education side degree. I forget what they call it. Bachelor. Oh man, I've totally forgotten what it's called. Baccalaureate program. You're now certified to be a music teacher in addition to also knowing how to do music, because that felt like a good way to make sure I'd get a job. And right about the time I was wrapping up that master's degree, I got a call from a friend of mine who had been teaching the choir at Digipen, and his husband had gotten a job out of state and they're moving away, and he was curious if I would be interested in learning more about that position. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. I like video games and I like music and I like being employed.
Yeah.
All great things.
All great things.
So I was initially hired there in 2016 just to conduct the choirs. And then I think even that very first semester, they were like, hey, as long as you're here, would you mind also teaching music history of Western music? It turns out that's something we'd be interested in having you do. And then I adjuncted there for 3 years with sort of an increasing course load and more classes turning up until they offered me a full-time job in 2019 on the music faculty.
The adjunct dream.
Adjunct dream. I am the one person in the entire world for whom that worked out.
Yeah.
So far, knock on wood, dreams come true. It also timed out really, really luckily with I became a parent in 2019 too. So it was like, oh, health insurance. That's great.
Yeah. For you and yours.
For me, leveling up into a new form of adult responsibilities. Feel super lucky to have kind of sidestepped into that Digipen role, and feel really lucky to be there and be part of the super cool programs they've got going on.
Well, that's awesome. Like, that's not, like you said, that's not quite what I would have guessed.
Yeah, that's why I thought I'd get that over with right away. So, so I do want to clarify that like most Digipen professors come in at post game development careers. There's a lot of former Nintendo employees, a lot of former Microsoft employees that come in to teach. And I'm a little bit of an outlier there in that I don't have a lot of direct game development, game industry experience. I came more in as a music educator. And so that's the thing I wrestle with sometimes. I've got some imposter syndrome around there and figuring out how to, be the best teacher I can be for the students I have, given what I actually know about and what I don't know about, and being transparent about that, I think has been healthy and helpful for my students to manage their expectations of what I can and can't teach them.
Well, I mean, it does kind of also show what I don't know if you would call Digipen like a trade school, but like a school that
officially no.
Yeah, exactly. Officially not. But you know what I'm saying? It's like a specific kind of education
from an accreditation
platform.
perspective, no. We are a 4-year undergrad college or university, but we are very much pretty laser focused on channeling students into careers in game development.
Totally. Right.
And to that extent, like you don't even apply to Digipen, you apply to a specific degree. It's like, where in my undergrad at a liberal arts college, it was like, don't declare a major until your junior year because everything is learning world history and critical writing. And Digipen is like, you need to know what you want because otherwise this program is too intense for you to be part of this if you aren't pretty clear on what kind of career you're looking at.
And that's what I hear when looking up stuff about Digipen. It's like, what I hear about Digipen is like, this is an intense program, right? It's like you go in because this is what you want to do with your career, right? You have goals and you have stuff like that. But it's cool to hear that also there is breadth to that within the realms of music and music history and how that pertains to games.
Yeah.
Like
and
that.
I mean, and I don't mean to say that like they're not taking, like they all take creative writing and not creative writing, but like basic communications, how to write correctly. They all take a college 101 that's like, here's how to take a shower and cook macaroni and cheese and talk to your professors and write an email that doesn't make you look like
I'm
a jerk.
I'm teaching that class this fall.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
That's an important class. Yep. I can always tell when I'm getting an interview request for a student in that class because they ask me like really specific weird questions. You're like, oh, you're doing that assignment. Okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe Stephen, you can tell us, we kind of just talked about it a little bit about what Digipen is. It's a university that's laser focused on game development, but I'm also kind of interested in the history of it. I know it's one of the earlier places that did
for
that.
Sure. Yeah. We are the oldest degree in game development you can get in the United States. Digipen started in 1988 by Claude Comer, who is, I believe, still the president. But the operations, obviously, as it's grown, have spread out to more folks leading things. It was originally started in Vancouver, in Canada, and then moved down into Redmond, Washington, where we are now. Gosh, I think in the 90s sometime. We're actually, the building we're in is a former Microsoft building. So it's like literally hardwired already for, software development and hardware development.
Yeah.
Redmond definitely feels like the Hollywood of the U.S. gaming
It is. I mean,
industry.
and that's by design, like for the reason that all the film schools are in LA, we're in Redmond because we're right near, the Nintendo's America headquarters and near Microsoft and kind of in the place where it's easy to funnel people into the careers they're looking into having. And hopefully they don't have to move too far after they graduate to go find that job they're looking for and that kind of thing. A friend of mine came on a tour of the campus a couple weeks ago and turns out used to work in that building 25 years ago when it was a Microsoft building. He was like, and Flight Simulator was right over here. And this is where they were working on a train simulator game. Like that.
Wow.
Yeah. I know also that Digipen's history is tied up a little bit with Nintendo, but I know that there was some crossover.
I know there's
there.
a lot of overlap in terms of like a lot of Digipen executive level folks came over from Nintendo. I know that I've heard a lot of folks at Digipen talk about how like a lot of the impetus to go work there is people who are working at Nintendo or working at Microsoft, working at Sony, and being like, we're not finding the talent force that we wish we were finding. We're not finding the people with the skill set and the collaborative mindset that we wish there were. Let's go train those people. Let's go build the workforce that we're looking to hire. And in particular, I know the music degree really came out of that. The music program we have was founded by Lawrence Schwedler, who was a longtime Nintendo composer and sound designer, who, Summer met at MagFest last year, where we all met together there. And that he was very much just like, there are good sound designers and there are good composers, but there aren't a lot of people who really have that overlap of skill, who have the understanding of like collaborative working on game development and just good basic music composing techniques, and understanding enough about sort of nonlinear composition, interactive music composing, and was like, and came into talks with Digipen to be like, can we create this program to teach people those skills to start creating the sound designer composers we wish we were hiring.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, and that really highlights and showcases that, like, yes, you could get, a creative arts degree at other schools, but this is really where, if you want to work with certain folks that are looking to specifically hire for certain companies,
for like these experiences and these, for sure.
Yeah.
And, so the core of the Digipen experience for all students is the game projects teams, which are inherently a multidisciplinary, cross degree program experience where their sophomore year, junior year, and for some students senior year, they build a game from scratch with folks from the other disciplines. And so you have usually just kind of one sound designer is working with a few artists and a few designers. And it's interesting to me that like there's no consistent model of team, which is true in the industry too. It's not like you need exactly 6 artists to make a game, but they kind of really they have a strong sense of student ownership of these projects. Like we, the faculty, have a lot of guidance and help them how to figure out an appropriate scope and give the right feedback. But we're really like, what kind of game do you want to make and how can we help you make that? And the biggest thing that we're teaching is how can you work with other people to creatively collaborate to make these games? Because that's the biggest thing that I hear over and over again. Every time I go to a conference, I always make sure I go to the how to get that first job in the game development industry kind of panel that I see at MagFest and Game SoundCon and GDC and all these places. And the number one thing I hear all the time is like, make sure you're someone people want to work with. Make sure you're a good communicator. Make sure you know how to share ideas and collaborate and not hold on to your ideas and fight your teammates.
Yeah, I mean, for my money, I think that any sort of creative degree that you're getting, for instance, I went to University of Texas with a radio, television, film degree that I left there with, right? And so it's you hear that a lot. And I'd actually like to get a little bit more into this in a second, but it's people ask me, it's well, what did you take away getting a film degree at college? And I think for me, it's learning how to work with people. It's building, it's right off the bat, it's building networking, learning how to meet people, learn how to work with producers and communicate and stuff like that. And I think that especially when you're doing interdisciplinary stuff, is an invaluable lesson that you'd learn.
Oh yeah, understanding that what you're doing is important, but not the be all and end all of a bigger project is a shockingly hard thing for people to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I feel like that's true in a lot of fields, but in game development, it's just inherently true. There aren't that many games being built by one developer whose vision dominates all aspects of the game. That's it. We get those. I know they exist, but like that is the exception and not the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And so teaching people how to work as part of a team is really, really the core of what we're teaching.
Yeah, that's great.
And like software is going to change, and that's not to say we don't teach that. Of course, we have a bunch of specific classes and all the kind of software they're going to be working on, but with the understanding that is a constantly evolving set of technical requirements and what students need to be able to do to get a job in whatever particular middleware they're working with is useful so that they can develop their portfolio. But what's really going to get them employed is their ability to collaborate.
Yeah, selfishly, I'm a fan of Digipen because I have enjoyed a lot of games that have come out of Digipen.
Yes.
I know, like, for instance, there's a game out now called Distance, which is a kind of futuristic racing game that's based on a game called Nitronic Rush. And that was a really, you remember Nitronic Rush? Yeah, that was a super fun game. It was kind of a little bit similar to like San Francisco 2049, like those kind of like arcade racers. Mm-hmm. And that game is a blast. But the reason they made Distance was because Digipen owns Nitronic Rush,
right?
Because they made it as their thesis or whatever, right? But for me, that's great because I could just go to the Digipen website and download that game for free.
Yes, you can. And hundreds of other games. They're so good about like, if you want a bunch of free, they're all like fairly small in scope, right? They're games that are made over the course by students over the course of 4 to 8 months. But there's a great library of free games on Digipen's website. I know Portal originally came out as a student game. The original version of Portal. Yeah. Narbacular Drop, which is the name of our conference room on campus now in honor of that project. Yeah.
Stephen, I have a question. I don't know if you can answer this question, but maybe you've talked to people around that have. But I'm interested in, we talked about how Digipen was was the first sort of university focused on this, but now we, exist in a world where there are game design programs at a lot of universities, and that's, been legitimized by that somewhat. And I'm kind of curious if people at Digipen, have changed how they teach now that there are, other programs, or if it's evolved like alongside that, or if it's just been sort of like we're focused on doing things how we do it and don't care about what other people are doing. Or
that totally makes sense, and that's a great question. And honestly, like if you were to ask any professor at Digipen, we're pretty stoked that it's getting more legitimacy and that there's more people teaching what we're teaching out there, because it's what people are hungry to be learning. It's such a huge field, and I know we can talk about like times are hard right now. It's a tough market to get a job in these days, but there are so many people that just want that, and there's so many people trying to get that out of programs that weren't built for that. There's I share an office with Brian Schmidt, who is a longtime game designer. He created the original Xbox startup sound, among other things, and did a bunch of games. And he's a super cool guy, super nice. And he got his degree from Northwestern in 1987 and basically forced them to create a dual degree between the music program and the engineering program, because he was like, no, I want to be doing electronic sound design. And they were like, what is that? Okay. And he was able to do that, but it's nice that not everyone has to like create their own degree program anymore. If you want to learn game development, you can find people who have already kind of put some thought into it and figured out how to make that happen. So about your question, Patrick, about if we're changing how we're doing it, I think Digipen very much has a culture of like it's sort of exhausting. We're constantly changing how we're doing it. I think we're a relatively small college, right? We're about, fact check me on this, but about 1,500 students, I think, currently or so. Very ballpark. So we're not a huge state university, and that has its ups and downs. And a thing that is both an up and a down is that we have a lot of flexibility in what we teach. So like in the music department in particular, we're right in the middle of a pretty major program revision. We're kind of overhauling what our priorities are in terms of there's this constant balance between like how much traditional music conservatory skills do we teach, how much digital audio production do we teach, how much what we only get a certain number of credit hours we get with our students, how can we maximize what we're trying to teach them. And we're kind of in the middle of reevaluating that, looking at what the jobs available are, And like to be blunt, the reality is that right now there are more sound designer entry level jobs than there are there aren't composer entry level jobs,
Mhm.
you know. And so we're trying to teach students to be prepared to be composers, but that first job you're going to get out of college is probably more doing sound design.
Yeah.
And so we're preparing people to get that and then have the skills to build and be doing more music composition later in their careers.
That's wonderful, though, that you're literally preparing them for reality, though. Like, that's not true of a lot of other schools. We were actually talking about this just a little bit, getting ready for this episode, that a lot of similar programs in other fields continue to just churn out the same thing because they want to make money.
Because it's
Not
what
that
you've
every-
always done, and you've got
that
tenure,
too.
and you're like have your class dialed in, and you want to teach it the same way forever. And
Yeah. As a higher ed professional, I am so curious about it from that perspective, that it makes sense that you have a lot more flexibility at a smaller private institution, but yes, that it could also be exhausting. Like,
it's still, I mean, like reinventing the wheel, takes that makes it sound bad. But like, okay, so here's an example in my personal teaching life. So I, for the last 8 years, have taught a 2-semester history of Western music sequence. So it's, 28 weeks in total. We go from like early medieval chant up through modern contemporary minimalism.
Sabrina Carpenter.
Sabrina Carpenter, exactly. Yeah. We go straight up till the Grammys 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Or whatever it counts as classical music these days, but so we've shifted that. So now we've taken all of that content, and now just starting this academic year, I taught all that in the fall. We compressed that 28 weeks into 14 weeks, 1 semester, history of Western music, which felt like a breakneck pace for someone who's used to teaching it in 2 and who learned it in 4 as an undergrad, but this semester I'm teaching a history of video game music class that is a brand new class I haven't taught before, which is exhausting and tons of work and so much fun.
can I audit that?
Yes, please. You can come take the midterm. I'm going to write as soon as we're done recording this.
It is midterms. It is midterms this week. Yeah.
We're doing next week is the midterm, and I'm realizing I have to tell them what's generally going to be on it, so I probably should write it soon. And just like it's putting me face to face with what's unusual in academia. This thing of having to reinvent the wheel and having to teach a brand new class fully from scratch. There's no existing materials. There's me, like I'm creating all of I'm not writing the reading assignments, but I'm finding the right reading assignments for them to do every week. I'm making all the stupid online quizzes to make sure they're motivated to actually do that reading. I'm making all the lecture slides. It's just a lot more work. Now I'm just complaining about my job, but
it's all good. It's a safe space.
It's a lot. It is a lot more work than teaching the same class. Like when I was teaching history of Western music every year, I would kind of look at my slides from the last year and be like, anything new on Johannes Brahms this year? Nope. Great. Cool. I know how to teach that day, while as this class, I'm kind of like just trying to stay a week ahead of my students on learning the content. And, and there's just so much out there too. If you're, diving into history of video game music, it's like, how to curate that down to 14 weeks. What 14 weeks are you going to teach? Which games are you going to pick? What are you going to include? It's just overwhelming. I have 2 amazing TAs, Riley and Jonathan, who are both wonderfully organized, nerdy, encyclopedic knowledge of video game music people who have been really helping me, curate this infinite playlist down to an actual reasonable amount of things to teach to students who have other classes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that you're keeping up with it, obviously you should, and you kind of have to, but it's like, it's not always that way, cause I took a class at, like I said, I went to UT. It was called Internet Studies, or it was like the history. It wasn't even the
all
history
of the
internet
in one class. Yeah.
No, yeah. Well, it was Internet Cultures
and
is what it was called. Right. And it was like, and I was like, oh, this is going to be exciting. It's going to be about emergent cultures that like formed online, like on the web, but it wasn't. It was like about like, this group of people use these kinds of websites. And then they showed us like videos on like the internet that were from like 1990. And I was like, what the fuck are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like we are so beyond that. And it's like when you're in a field like video games that like, obviously at this point,
so rapidly.
Right. But I mean, it is like it's like a 50-year-old industry at this point, but it's like, think about when the film industry was 50 years old, like stuff was still changing. We didn't even have universities really at that point until like really the 70s in the film industry, right? That's when like UCLA was first starting to come around and doing film programs. That's where we got our George Lucas's from. And that's where we got, that whole spat of 70s filmmakers, right? And so the fact that like, this is going on, and you said Digipen's been around since the 80s, is exciting. And I'm sure the university itself has evolved. And I'm sure as well now with the fact that a lot of other universities, including the one I went to, have their own video game design degrees. Like that also keeps it competitive, right? And it's like, I like the idea that it's all kind of evolving at the same time. And the way that we teach these things are constantly evolving. I think there's a lot to learn from people that are self-taught as well, that you can then bring into these same sort of academic situations. So I just think it's a really interesting and fascinating thing for such an emergent, it still feels very much like the Wild West a little bit, this industry, particularly now,
Yeah, I mean, and like teaching this history of video game music class has been interesting too, because it's really brought up a lot of like, as a person teaching history of Western music, there's a lot of like, whose voices, whose music is included when we're talking about like the canon and the pressure of being here at what feels like kind of the edge of where the canon of video game music. I'm like, oh, now I'm part of this. I'm like another white guy teaching mostly about white guys. Oh God. And trying to make sure that like what I'm teaching is accurate, but that I'm also not excluding people who contributed in meaningful ways to this history, where it's like, there's just so much less documentation about this than there is about, or maybe that's just me being biased, but like, musicology, there's 10 million things that have been written about Beethoven, right? Like,
right. And we talk a lot on this show about, Nintendo and the Japanese gaming industry's like lack of accreditation, or not accreditation, but credits for their composers.
Female composers.
Female composers, especially. And it's, but I mean, in general, it's like you play those old games and it's like the credits are like S Tanaka or something like that. And you're like, that could be any number of Tanakas.
That could be, exactly.
Like they just don't like to, and even up till today with like Nintendo music and stuff like that, where a lot of times, unless you actually go digging and your stuff, you're not going to know who these actual people were. So making sure that these people are properly taught is very important.
Right. Can I like brag for 1 second?
Please.
I have a Nintendo credit because Lawrence aggressively pushed Nintendo to credit all of the performers on. So we got contracted, basically the Digipen music department, to do the remake of Mario vs. Donkey Kong that came out on the Switch last year.
The NST game?
Yeah, exactly. So it was a remake of a game that Lawrence had done the music for originally on the Game Boy Advance, like 20 years earlier. And so they came to him and they were like, hey, we're doing a remake of this for the Switch. Would you be interested in doing the music? And he said, yeah, I'm going to bring in the sound department. And so basically all the music for that game was written, composed, arranged. I shouldn't say composed, because obviously using a bunch of original Koji Kondo themes in there too, but all the live music tracks on that were all Digipen music faculty or recent alumni doing all the audio production on it. And I got to play trombone on the opening credits on the Donkey Kong.
Hey, there you go. Yes! Good for you.
But to your point about credits, that like Lawrence really kind of pushed pretty hard to get credit for everyone who worked on it, which is unusual. Usually you'd have just kind of the audio lead might get a credit, but you're like the flute player getting a credit in the final credits is pretty much unheard of. And I appreciated him going to bat for us. That felt,
if they do it for movies, cool. They should do it for video games.
Yeah,
it's also
more common in Hollywood too. So
I'm not trying to start a war between nations here, but that is also just like Nintendo's Western studios. I mean, that's a cultural difference, right? It's like you see that from someone like Nintendo Software Technology, that is one of their Western studios, where it's like, hey, look, like this is what people expect in this country. You know? That's just the cultural norms are different in that regard. But I feel like we're getting a little bit away from the actual education. But yeah, it's fascinating stuff to hear about.
Yeah, I know that you don't really like teach maybe production. Is that true?
So that is mostly true. Although I am this semester for the first time, I am shadowing the game project class. So I'm in there, and just this last week I was I don't know, unofficially teaching. I was there. I was play testing all the students' games they're at. Like they just did their first milestone, so they had to have a like playable build with proof of life for audio. So I was there just to kind of listen to the first draft, or I'd listen to. I'm like playing the game that in most of their games they're not yet at the point. There's nothing you can fight. There's just like you can kind of wander around the world. And some of the art is done, but there's lots of like just words in the sky that say like a dragon will be here as the like TBD. But but so getting to be there and seeing them, I've been going to this class every week where they've got about 120 students in this big room all working together, split up into 11 teams, and talking to them about like what their vision for the games are. Honestly, I'm pretty stoked about it. It's a class I'm hoping and expecting to be teaching at some point in the future. And so I asked if I could shadow it this year just to get a sense of what that actually looks like. And it's so fun. If I could just share, like, one of my students made a game, or, I think of my students as the audio students, but the other ones are all my students too, I guess, in this class. But I know the audio lead on each team really well because they're all like in my choir and in my history class, and they're the kids that I like have meaningful personal connection with. So one of them, they're working on a game that takes place in a kind of smashed up old cathedral, and it's this beautiful, huge Gothic architecture. And the music he wrote for it is all this organ music that's coming kind of mysteriously from up in the rafters somewhere. And I was like, this is cool. Have you ever thought about checking out a real life space? And I told him I was like, my friend Kyle's playing an organ recital this Sunday night at St. Mark's Cathedral. Go check it out. And he just last night sent me pictures from it, and he went and he got to interview the organist about like how the organ worked and how the acoustics of that space worked. And he's going to be putting all that stuff into his game. And it made me feel like such a good teacher.
Yeah.
Well, which like, and the game production classes, the ones I have, that's the fuel on my imposter syndrome fire, right? Like, that's the part of me that is the most like, I don't have a technical background in this, but I know how to like listen to a game, and I know how to care about music, and I know what makes the music feel immersive and feel real, and I know how to point students in the right direction on that.
Yeah.
Well, that sort of is kind of where I was headed in asking this. And if you don't have a good answer for this,
Before I ran off with a super long tangent. Yeah.
but that is like, what is different about audio or music in games versus if somebody was to just study music or, general audio production or what have you? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, obviously the biggest one is the interactivity, is the like, and we teach multiple courses on non-linear music composition or interactive music in a way that, like, most music degrees, that's not a thing that you have to talk about. Nobody's going to talk to you about different game states and whys and how to program music to transition or segue from one mood to another. At most, maybe in a film music degree, you might be dealing with, how to make it adaptable enough that it can survive cuts or whatever. But really what we're teaching is a lot more focused on that interactive nature. Mm-hmm. So we talk, I think there's some overlap. In a film music degree, you're gonna learn about orchestration with a perspective on world building through sound design, right? And that's a thing we're doing too. We're like, how do you compose music that's gonna put the player's mind in the world of that game? Like, what instruments are gonna bring that to mind? What kind of harmonies? What kind of musical language? And that's why we teach history of Western music as well, is because I want my students to know what it sounds like. If your game is set in the Renaissance, what does Renaissance music sound like? And so, like, that's definitely different from, I don't know, either of the music degrees I had nothing like that. All the composition classes I took were focused a lot on fairly like art music contemporary techniques, which is a certain brand of academic composition that has its place, but I think is less. I'm trying to find the nicest way to say not useful. Yeah. Which is not a nice way to say that, but No,
one of my most distinct memories from one of my theory classes was there was a composition assignment that we had that I could never get through theory. I've grown since then, but like this was, over 10 years ago. And I just like felt like I was never getting it. And the specific assignment, I was like, I think I finally got this. And I was so proud of it, my composition, and I brought it into class. And I remember the teacher going through and looking at everybody's assignment, saw mine and said, okay, go put yours on the board. And I was like, oh my gosh, I finally done it. And I'm getting recognition for this. Yeah. And he goes, Summer didn't do the assignment correctly, but it's a good composition. So we're all going to sing it. And I was like, that's right. I might not understand theory, but I'm writing good shit.
But it sounds good.
So, and then he was like, this is when my band performs. So you can learn about like actually like what music should sound like. And I was just like, that's what I want. Yeah. I hear that of like, I had such a disconnect because like what we were learning in class was so disconnected from what like any of us really wanted to do. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do feel like there's a lot of that in the academic music world.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I taught myself how to play piano, and I certainly don't know how to do that the right way. You know what I mean?
But you know how to do it in a way that is satisfying to you, and you can play the music you want to play.
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course. I mean,
Great.
it's
Then
like,
who cares?
It's like I use these 4 fingers to play chords, which is definitely the wrong way to do it. But I can.
There
sing
are other
while
fingers you're
I'm doing
welcome to use if you want more notes. But
it's too much for my brain. But I got the 1.
Can you show me which fingers again?
No. It's not. It's not important.
It is a little bit to me, but
these right here.
Your index.
I keep my middle.
ring.
I keep my middle finger up. So
middle finger up at
So
all
you're not
times.
using your pinky and thumbs.
Well, no, because that's too hard.
Oh,
look, I strum chords on the piano and I sing
to
at the same
preserve
time.
authentic 4-channel polyphony for NES
Precisely.
composition.
but at the same time, I've also like watched someone like Tom York of Radiohead who like basically plays the piano the same way. It's like the way that he plays the piano is like he's strumming a guitar. You know what I mean? What I'm trying to say is, this is completely an aside, is that I think that like it's important, yes, to foster learners like that, and I'm interested, like maybe this is getting to like a bigger question about like a gaming university in general, but I mean, this is something that again, like I'm sorry I keep going back to like film school, but it's like there are so many books out there, like what is it, Rebel Without a Camera, or what is that what that movie is called? Or that book is called?
Robert Rodriguez's
Robert Rodriguez's book, which he is famously anti-film school. You know what I mean? He's like, go out, work in the field, like make your
movies.
Exactly. Get your education, like creating, right? And I feel like there is a lot of that in gaming, right? I mean, obviously, I'm not trying to undercut Digipen, but it's like, there's tutorials on making whatever, and it's like, regardless of what you do, doing the work is always going to be your best experience. So I'm wondering, like what is it that like Digipen, or like say even a big like a public
Berkeley
college
or USC or yeah
exactly, what to you is like the benefit of attending a school like this, paying the tuition in order to get a much more specialized education? Like what do you see as like one of the major benefits, as opposed to just doing the work?
Yeah, no, that's a super valid question for people looking at a career. And when I heard someone asked almost for not verbatim that whole question, but that same concept I heard at Game SoundCon last fall, was like, why would I want to get a degree if I could just go do it?
Right.
And I think if you're just going to go do it, you should just go do it. I think the people who, there are a couple of advantages to getting the degree. One is just like being in that world, immersing yourself full time, being a student. That is your full-time life.
Sure.
Will force you to do that work. If you're a person who thrives in, systems and deadlines and outside accountability and immersing yourself in that culture, you're like, I'm going to school, I'm having lunch every day with the people who are doing that. There is value in that. There's value in being around other nerds who are excited about the same shit that you're excited about. Like that can keep that flame, that will help you do the work.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And being around professors who have, not me, but other people, professional experience in that, who can, I mean, and I shouldn't diminish myself. I think I offer some good guidance too.
You played trombone on
I played trombone on Mario versus Donkey Kong.
I went
You can hear me.
No.
My 5-year-old is so unimpressed by that, by the way. I keep hoping he'll care. So being around other people, being in that culture, I think is super valuable. Getting that kind of direct feedback, that's the thing that like, look, I've learned tons of shit through YouTube tutorials. I think that's a great way to learn things. I think it's not the best way to learn like an instrument. I think if you're learning an instrument, it's valuable to have a teacher who's going to listen to you play and give feedback and be like, hey, did you know your pinky can play that note? And then you can play more notes. It'll expand your piano tonal palette.
I think your point about different people too, right? Like, I feel like I'm somebody who can really do well on online classes. Like I can self-motivate really well and I can interact with online materials and do well. But I have a friend who I think just an online class is not really worth it. They need to, it's just different people are going to,
people learn in different ways. And
if you want to go on and make your own game with it's your vision, then probably you should just go do tutorials. But if you want to work on a team, then maybe this is a better path or something.
Yeah. And what you said about like, motivation and just the different ways that people learn, there's always going to be, your Steve Jobses or whatever, the guys that, drop out of, college famously. And
because they're already doing
against it.
Like,
yeah. Or they're just like, they just view the world in a different way, like I know, like I really value the education that I got, like at a film school, and not just I learned how to network or whatever, but it's like I took an editing class and now I'm a professional editor, and I mean, it's like, and not only that, it's like having a degree when you're trying to stand out, applying to different, jobs in any kind of industry does help, whether or not that's a whole different conversation we can have on how fair that is in a meritocracy, quote unquote, but it's like, but I could see a lot of, I see very clear steps between the education that I got and the sort of, jobs that I've been able to get. Not that I'm, rolling in the dough, editing cartoons right now, but you get the idea. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's a good way to put it.
The real money's in second market Switch 2s.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I've got my boys in R&D making copies as we speak. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's just true of like a 4-year degree generally, but like just being exposed to different perspectives. Right. Like a traditional education just gets you like a well-rounded education. Like, yes, it is hyper-focused, but I have been looking at some of the different career or degree plans, and they all do still require electives in the humanities. That is literally how we develop like well-rounded individuals to enter society, is through humanities classes. Yeah, and they're still doing that.
Like, humanity and storytelling.
Exactly. How can you do that without being exposed to these things, both through class and through your fellow classmates, and just in that campus climate and culture, which it sounds like they are fostering at Digipen.
Oh, yeah.
So
the campus culture is so great and nerdy. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, God. Sure. If I could do it all again.
Do it. I mean, no pressure, whatever. I could put in a good word for you. My desk is right next to admissions, so
I've been hovering over the MFA, like.
That's a whole.
The MFA program is so cool.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a whole interesting thing. Just like master's degrees, going back to school after your 4-year, like that's something that like is so particular for different people. Like it takes a certain kind of person to want to do that and get a doctorate or a master's or whatever. It's like when I finished
rubbing my face in master's degree that I don't get paid for. Yes.
Well, that's a conversation we can have. But I think that it's like, I think like I would never go back to school personally, but I know so many people that thrive in that kind of environment. You know what I mean? Yeah, and it's just like structure, dog. It's like the world is so crazy. And it's like having a structure, having like you said, deadlines, like having something to where you can like have these kind of goal-based, you have goalposts set for you, as opposed to having to
inventing your own while also having to work a job is just I couldn't do it. I'm not focused enough to
it's hard.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. I was like, no pressure, because I realize these questions can be sensitive, like in academia. Do you have aspirations of like a higher degree and like, or like what does like any kind of advancement?
So. No, probably not for me. No, if I can be happy, I mean, I would be happy to keep teaching at Digipen forever if that's an option. Like I feel like I'm doing good work there. So I have a master's, so it's not a terminal degree,
right?
But like I got a lot of friends with doctorates in choral conducting who are looking for a job. It is tough out there, and like
you've debt, student loan debt and all this kind of stuff.
And
it's
listen,
like stuff
I got 2 small kids. I'm happy to just have health insurance at a paycheck that shows up every other Friday while doing work that feels significant or at least, fun.
Yeah, exactly.
I had one other like just sort of and maybe more cynical based answer to why you would want to do the college degree. And it's I hate the word networking, and I hate networking, and thinking of it in that conscious way feels it's gross to me, and I'm bad at it. But thinking of it in the organic way of when you graduate from Digipen, you've spent 4 years around 1,500 other nerds who know what your degree means, who know the work that you've put in, and probably at least 100 of them that you've worked directly with on a project. And those are the people who are all out there getting other jobs, and the people who are going to be like, hey, there's an opening for a junior level sound designer at Nintendo. Go check out this job. I'll put in a good word for you.
Yeah.
And like,
it's a built-in cohort.
That's hard to do. Exactly. You have this cohort and you have this network that that is there to support you. Like I will say the campus culture is really positive and supportive in a way that I appreciate. I expected it to feel more kind of knives out competitive, like especially now, with just so many layoffs and so much competition for the jobs. But I've seen a couple examples lately of students really kind of lifting each other up in ways that have made me just like,
oh, that's wonderful
so
to hear.
Proud
I'm
Papa teacher.
so glad to hear that that's what it's like, because I was a little anxious about like, do they all hate each other or no? It's this wonderful collaborative environment, which is what you would hope for. And that's,
they're
exactly
all humans. They're human,
Sure.
There's conflict, but generally they all share a passion for games, and that they can find that passion in each other and make it collaborative.
They're being taught that these are the people that they're going to work with for the rest of their lives or their careers. Yeah.
And, I personally know people working at Nintendo now who are Digipen grads.
Oh, right on.
So it's like that like.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm sure
That's
you
less
do.
surprising for me.
You probably actually know this person I'm talking about. We could talk after the show. I'm interested to see if you actually know
Cool.
them.
Yeah.
But it's like, like you said, the proximity there, it's just like there is a pipeline, right? And it's like anything in such a competitive industry, I think anything that kind of gets your little leg up, get your foot in the door. Exactly.
And Digipen is extremely aggressive about having like company days. Nintendo's coming to campus for today, showcase your games, talk to people, like they're very career focused in that way.
Yeah. And I think that's great. And it's, as much as we want the arts industries that are so competitive that people want to get into, as much as we want it to truly be a meritocracy, it's just like the reality is that like whatever job you're trying to get into, whether it's in the arts or entertainment or otherwise, so much of it is who you know, what you have, what boxes that you check, right? And so anything to kind of like get you you got to play the game a little bit in order to.
The cynical view of that is like,
oh,
people are out there hiring their friends. The realistic way of looking at it is that people are hiring people they know will do a good job.
Precisely.
People are hiring people that they can vouch for, that they like, I know this person's going to show up on time and do the work and be fun to work. Like if I have to work with someone every day, I want it to be someone that I know isn't going to make my life miserable to be around 9 to 5 days a week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should head towards wrapping this up. So I want to make sure that if there's any big discussion points we missed or anything, Stephen, you wanted to say that we didn't get a chance to talk about, that everybody can get their little piece in here.
Beep, boop, boop. I'm just looking at like I had a couple things I wanted to remember to say, but no, I don't know. Digipen's cool. I like my students.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating discussion, and I think that there's a lot of different options for people out there when it comes to getting higher education, and I'm really glad that a place like Digipen like exists and has existed for so long. It has been an option and an alternative for a lot of people trying to get into this industry. And obviously, like if you're listening to this right now and you're trying to decide what to do with your education, there are so many pathways that you can go down. It doesn't seem like there's a wrong answer to any of it, but it's nice to have like alternatives like this in like these super specialized fields.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting talking to you and learning a little bit more about like what these programs can
what they actually do.
Yeah. Cause you hear, cause I remember seeing ads for Digipen on, forever ago.
Oh man, I was
gaming magazine subscriber for a long time.
Okay, so the Video Game History Foundation just put out their library, online library with like huge archive a couple weeks ago. I just for fun put in Digipen and was just looking up like the oldest references to Digipen, and there's these like letters to the editor in 1994 of Game Developer Magazine being like, hey, there's this new thing you should know about. It's kind of cool to see it in like really old school 90s magazine font.
Wow.
And like,
yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Great stuff.
I could talk about this forever. I love talking about just differences in higher ed, but especially with video games. I'm like, oh, give me.
Oh my gosh. And just like from a choir conductor perspective, I feel super lucky to have stumbled into this because all my friends who have higher ed conducting jobs have like, there's usually a lot of like really high pressure concerts you got to do. And there's like an aggressive alumni network that like you got to be doing the Beethoven Mass every year. Or
Oh
you
my
gotta be
gosh.
singing at the President's Circle event. And my choirs are just a bunch of nerds that want to sing video game arrangements that they write. And it's so much fun. And they're so like empowered to do it. And it's like,
yeah, I know that's my other question then. So like what does that actually look like? Like what do the ensembles and choirs look like? And what are those
performances? Is that okay? Do we have time for me to talk about those things? Because
yeah.
Great, cool.
This will be the wrap up.
So the music majors are all required to be in choir for 2 years, even if they're instrumentalists, which makes me so happy because there's like uncomfortable singers being like, I have to be in choir, and then they usually really like it. Not always, but so there's 2 choirs. There's the Dragon Chorus, which is the open to everybody required for all music majors, and for a lot of non-music majors, it's their like social emotional outlet. It's their like 1 credit class with no homework that they get to show up to and move their bodies and sing and interact with other humans without a screen, and that's the only class where they do that. And I get to feel like it's the closest thing to PE they're ever going to go through.
Stop.
And then there's we also have the chamber singers, which is the like smaller audition choir for the singers who want to do more stuff. And we do a couple of concerts every year. They're usually themed, and students do a lot of like arranging for it. I try to make space for them to compose or arrange their own music for it, which is always fun. Last year we did a concert that was all inspired by the Orpheus and Eurydice Greek tragedy, Greek myth. So like we did a couple songs from Hades Town. We did a couple songs from Hades the game. We did a couple songs from like the Monteverdi opera of Orfeo and Eurydice.
I love that so much.
And so like I'm like sneaking in some old school music education on them while also trying to tie it into like game music and excitement around that. And and my secret master plan is that next year I really want somebody to write music for one of their student game projects that the choir records, because that feels like the thing that like is right within reach, and we haven't quite pulled it off yet. It's tricky with like the rehearsal schedule versus when they have to have the music ready for their games, but that's my ultimate goal, is to start trying to like tie those things together a little bit more, because we've got this live choir just available that wants to sing game music, and
they should be doing that.
All right, well, I think that's going to do it then for this main topic discussion on Digipen. Thanks so much, Stephen, for all of that.
Oh, thanks for letting me blab about it. It makes me really happy.
We are going to take another short break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the games that we've been playing recently. All right, well, real briefly, I wanted to follow up that I did roll credits on It Takes Two with my son. We played it pretty fast. We were into it, and I think
did you save y'all's marriage, or
we point,
how old is your son?
He's 10.
If I'm asking. Okay, cool.
He's 10. So this game is great for playing with somebody who's pretty good at video games, but maybe not like stellar. Like they really balance the difficulty in this game so well. Like he's pretty good at games, but he's not like, sometimes when we played more technical stuff, it's harder. But so
I remember being 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys last week were talking, I wasn't on the show last week, but you guys were talking about people who tried to play with their significant others in order to save a relationship. That was me. It did not work.
You weren't even who I was thinking about when I said that, so I'm really sorry.
Well, we'll move on to talk about the other game that I wanted to talk about, and that
relationships.
Is Persona 5 Royal. So on the holiday break, I started playing Persona 5, but I've held off on bringing it up because it's a big game, and I kind of only felt like I was scratching the surface, but I feel like now I have played enough to talk a little bit about it. I think I picked this up because, it's gone on sale multiple times for like $12 or $15, somewhere in that range. And I picked it up on a sale a long time ago when it was like that. Finally started playing it, and I get it. I get why people love this game now.
It's a great game. Yeah.
I think the thing that has struck me the most is that the game just has this sort of style to it. Like I don't know another word.
It's slick. That's the word I use to describe this game. That's like the only word I can think of. It's slick.
And I think I understand why people like it because of that so much. Like there's a lot of things that I don't know that I love, but I think that it's just sort of got this really solid style and it feels cool to play. And the other thing I think the game does really well, and this is not really a spoiler, but I think the game, when I first started playing it, I'm like, why do I care about this main character? But very quickly, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am on their side. Like everybody is such a dick to them, and like unfairly
which
so.
The main character,
Joker,
Okay.
like the main character,
Right.
because I mean, it's not like a spoiler, but
it's the beginning of the game. Yeah,
you know, they've been kind of unfairly accused of something, and everybody is spreading rumors about them, and all the teachers and adults are like treating them like they're a criminal, and I'm like, but they're not, you know. And the game does a really good job of that sort of like make you care about the protagonist early on. So those are the things I've noticed so far. But anyway, we'll see how far I get. I don't know, it's a big game. So
yeah. I am interested to hear you talk more about that. I wish I had the patience to.
I don't know if I do.
Yeah, we'll see. It's a long ass game.
I feel like you'll get through it. You played Shin Megami Tensei.
I did not finish Shin Megami Tensei 5.
Oh, you didn't finish it?
No, you just made a podcast about it.
How many hours? How many hours did you put into that one?
That game is too long and not as good as this game. I think this game I have more of a shot at.
This is a little more palatable than
I need you to get through this. I need you to get through Persona 5 Royal so that way you can play Metaphor Refundatio afterward.
Well, yeah, now I'm kind of wishing I was playing that because that looks more up my alley.
It is. Oh, it's so up your alley. It's fantasy, anti-racism. Okay.
Yeah. I'll go next. I did beat Outer Wilds on stream recently. Incredible game, obviously. I mean, I've heard so much about how this game is so good. I had started this game a long time ago and only got like a couple hours into it. Actually putting my nose to the grindstone and completing this game on stream. Like this is the kind of game that it's good for me to stream because then I like keep myself accountable to actually like finish it, and I can speak out loud as I'm like piecing things together and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So it was an incredible experience, an emotional journey, and I really truly loved Outer Wilds. I am looking forward to playing the DLC, and which I hear is also incredibly fun, and I can't wait to see what Mobius Games does next, because wow, what an incredible like first non-mobile game project that they've done. Really incredible stuff. I played a couple other smaller games. One of them is Terry's Other Games, it's called. You guys may know a guy named Terry Kavanaugh, who is one of my favorite indie devs and has been for forever. He is the creator of VVVVV, Super Hexagon, Dicey Dungeons, and a bunch of other games, kind of like an early indie auteur in this space. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting him in a very awkward encounter at a Fantastic Arcade several years ago. Like actually recently someone was like, asked him to be on a podcast. He's like, I don't do podcasts. I'm like, that does not surprise me. When I met him, it was a very strange encounter, but wonderful guy. And he was very kind and generous when I met him. But he's an awesome developer, and he has this kind of collection of games called Terry's Other Games, which is basically his basement collection. So it's a lot of stuff that he made, little tiny games that he made, some Flash games, some other stuff like this that have never really had full proper releases. And so it's cool to have like a collection of like 20 little games made by a developer that you really admire. So I've been kind of working my way through that. One of them I do want to shout out is Don't Look Back, which is his first Flash game, and that was a hugely inspirational game for me in like kind of the early days of my like indie gaming endeavors. So it was amazing to go back and revisit that game. I've played that game so many times, but having it on my Steam Deck is awesome.
Don't Look Back is the theme of Orpheus, by the way. So.
Yeah, absolutely. This game has some classical music in it as well, and it's like it's an interesting. It describes the mechanics of the game and the plot of the game simultaneously, whilst being a like 10 to 15 minute long Flash game. I don't know how he did it. The guy's brilliant. Anyway, real quickly, I also played a game called Looney Landers since I've been on the show last. Did I talk about that last time I was on the show? I don't think so. Okay. I also played a game called Looney Landers. This is made by the developers of Donut Dodo. This is a very fun, like 2-player arcadey sort of game. I don't love it as much as Donut Dodo. Donut Dodo is a game that I put like a bunch of hours into and I could replay over and over and over again. The replay value isn't there for me for Looney Landers, but as a competitive game, it's a lot more fun. And I did want to give a shout out to the developers here, Pixel SRS, I think, Pixel, and because I actually was playing this on my Steam Deck and I really wanted to play this with a friend using the remote play together feature where you can basically send games, you basically stream a game for another friend that's on Steam, but they didn't have it enabled. And I was like, man, that's a bummer. This would be a perfect game for that. So I just like sent a message to the developer and within like 20 minutes, they made this feature up on the game. And I was able to play it with my friend flawlessly at that point. So shout outs to Pixel for actually like listening to me and like implementing a thing like right away, and it just greatly improved the value of the game like immensely. So definitely for that reason you should check out Looney Landers. I was having a ton of fun with that. I played a demo for an upcoming platformer called Ruffy and the Riverside. This is a game that I've had on my radar for a really long time. It's got a beautiful like 2D like hand animated aesthetic in a 3D world, very much a sort of Paper Mario-esque looking game, but it is a 3D platformer, very much like a regular 3D Mario platformer. It has a really cool mechanic where you can kind of copy certain elements of different objects and paste them onto different objects. So that was really fun to play, and I can't wait for that full release. And then lastly, I wanted to give a shout out to a game called 140, which I believe refers to the beats per minute of the soundtrack. But it is by Jeppe Carlsen, who was the creator of Cocoon and was also one of the developers on Inside and Limbo. And this was kind of like an earlier game from him, but I'm seeing a lot of the stuff that ended up being in Cocoon in this game. It's like a 2D platformer with some really interesting kind of like color swapping mechanics and stuff like that. So I would really recommend checking out that as well. It's dirt cheap on Steam and definitely worth playing.
Right on. Well, game that I've been really looking forward to, put a lot of hours into the demo, Rift of the Necro Dancer, same people that made Crypt of the Necro Dancer, came out this past week. Highly recommend if you're into rhythm games, highly recommend if you're just into like the VGM cover community, because a lot of VGM folks, like fan folks, are on this game that have made the soundtrack for it. A lot of them are actually going on tour soon. This game is basically like DDR, but you have to learn enemy attack patterns, which is kind of genius. It's really good. It should be coming to Switch soon. It was supposed to be released at the same time, but like we know how that can go sometimes. Just like there's always delays with console. Like it's harder to do that than, some people think. When my sister came over, she has been really into Beastie Ball. It's still, I believe, the like early version of it, like the full version isn't out yet, but played a lot of Beastie Ball with her. I am so into these critters. Love that. I think what a lot of these other creature games that are trying to be similar to Pokemon don't always do super well is executing just the creatures themselves. Like something about the creatures in Pal World to me, they just don't have that, whatever that spark is. And I feel like that spark is in Beastie Ball. I love these critters. I love they're called, they do like a metamorphosis as opposed to like an evolution. That's like more, because that kind of makes more sense. And yeah, just the idea of doing Pokemon moves, but you're actually playing volleyball or tennis is just incredible to me. I'm super, super into that. Then we also decided to jump into Mario Kart Super Circuit for the Game Boy Advance. It was this, just like reminiscing, it was the very first Mario Kart that we had ever played together. And then while playing it, we decided that we wanted to just S-rank everything and unlock everything. And there's a lot of hidden factors in that game for actually getting higher scores. Like there's a lot of like stupid requirements that are just hidden, and it's fun to figure them out. And then I did re-download Fortnite because I decided it was finally time to buy a battle pass again, because Hatsune Miku is in Fortnite, y'all, and it is honestly so worth it for her and those emotes. I love being Hatsune Miku. Shout out to a friend of the show, Weast. We were playing Fortnite together. I'm sorry, guys. Fortnite is a good game. Apparently, she started playing it again because she's at the podcast where I was talking about Fortnite every single week. And she was like, all right, it's time to play Fortnite again. So we're playing Fortnite again.
Awesome. What about you, Steven? You've been playing anything cool recently?
No, but I've been playing some games recently. No, the vast majority of the gaming I do in this era of my life is with my 5-year-old son. So that limits to a certain kind of genre, but we're having a lot of fun. He's like almost old enough to play things. Mostly, previously we had played a lot of Tears of the Kingdom with him just shouting at me what to do, and me doing all the button pushing, but him determining everything that would happen. But over the last month, we checked out a bunch of games from the Digipen library that has a great game library. You can check games out and take home. And we found Mario Odyssey to be super fun and joyful and successful. The 2-player version of it is so good, where like your kid can control Cappy and just run around. And we had a lot of fun. We got to the end credits of that. And then because I've been teaching this history of video game music class, I've been looking at old games and so like we played some Space Invaders, or like not the original arcade, but we found an online Space Invaders simulator, and for some reason my kid was so into it, so he's been like requesting it every day now, and it's like it's a good game. It's it's very addictive, it's very compelling, it's simple. Whatever. It's a great game. And then lastly, we've just been playing a lot of Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo together. My wife has her Super Nintendo still from her childhood. Okay. And yeah. I know. I saw you uncertain what link to put on that. It's the Super Nintendo, the old Donkey Kong Country. I was just like ranting at my students about how good the music from it was, and then being like, oh, actually the gameplay is also really fun. And there's a shocking amount of storage space in my brain dedicated to like where you're supposed to open the secret games.
Yeah, that's some stuff just never goes away.
Why is that still in my brain? Did I feed my pets today? I don't know, but I definitely know where to find the extra rhino coin thing.
We had David Wise on the show actually talking about the
I gotta go listen to
the
that
Donkey Kong Country soundtrack. That was an early episode, but a really fun good one.
I'm gonna go track that one down and listen to it because that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's going to do it then for this episode. Thanks again once more, Steven, for coming and talking to us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks to MilkyWay.co, who does our website. Thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. Thanks to all of our patrons on Patreon. If you're looking for me, Patrick, you can find me online as PDYX.
You can find me, I'll specify now, pretty much just on Discord or on Blue Sky at Weebwitched.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Steven? Where can people find you online?
Yeah, if you look Steven Obent, Obent, there's an apostrophe in the real name, but not in most handles because that's how the world works. I'm on Blue Sky there. That's probably the easiest place to find me. I have a YouTube channel if you want a shocking array of weird music videos and videos of my kid doing funny stuff. It's not very professional, but there's some funny stuff there. Into it.
Definitely subscribe to that YouTube channel. And if you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Blue Sky and Twitter. We are at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We have a website, which is switchheadz.com, and we have a Discord and Patreon, where you can financially support the show. We'd love it if you would go over there and join our Patreon. And please join us over there on the Discord. We'd love to see you on there. It's such a wonderful community full of like-minded, non-toxic gamers. And we have such a wonderful time on the Discord, man. I don't know where I'd be without them. We'd also love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow
I did
us
this morning.
Oh, look at that. We love that. No, we love growing the YouTube. Yeah, absolutely. And also leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. They do reviews now. So anything you can do to spread the word of the podcast really helps us out. So thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. That's going to do it for this episode. What a fascinating discussion. It was great to have you on. Make sure you continue to tune in because next week we're going to have another banger of an episode because, of course, there's going to be a direct in February. Right, guys? Come on. I don't know. We'll see. But other than that, you know the drill. Stay safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Why don't you get all your finances together and get yourself a tuition to Digipen right now? You heard all the benefits. It's worth it. Go do it.
Or buy a Switch 2, which is
or buy a Switch 2. It's either or, really, at this point. We love you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.